You ready? Okay, so thank you everyone joining us today in the room and online. It is very lovely to be speaking with you today and a fantastic opportunity for us to share some more of our project with you. So we're going to talk today about a HEPPP project which is in its second year. So the project is about First Nations students here at CDU, undergraduate students and their experiences here at CDU, with the intention, of course, of always thinking about our practice here at CDU and the service that we provide and how we can learn some lessons about students' responses and feedback and improve, always trying to think of how we improve what we do in catering for our First Nations students here at CDU, but also in that learning process, thinking about how we as lecturers can improve our own practice with the messages that we find from this project as well. So bit of a reciprocity going on there. So our project today is our Higher Education of First Nations Students HEPPP project. So it's the CDU story. So what's happening here at CDU? And we would like to start by acknowledging the First Nations people on the lands across which we live and work and pay our respect to elders, both past, present and emerging as well. So thank you very much. And this is our wonderful team. So I get to work with these lovely, very smart researchers. So there's Dr. Kate, Dr. Guzyal, and Miss Alicia Boyle, who also joins the team to help with her expertise across many projects. Kate and Guzyal and myself started out as a project team before this because we were thinking about our own different experiences and then coming to CDU and how that impacted based on our own background. So myself as a First Nations student starting here at CDU and teaching. So why this project? So it's an investigation of the engagement of undergraduate First Nations students, and you'd be surprised with the data that CDU collects. There wasn't much information that we'd already collected. So we like to say this is one of the first investigations into that space in as much detail as we've included. So it's appropriate and positive engagement of First Nations students in higher ed. And it's about not only enticing students to come to CDU, but also about supporting them on their journey when they're here and then being able to congratulate them when they complete their studies. So looking at the whole cycle through to completion. And the project, as I mentioned earlier, will deliver mutually informed lessons for CDU staff and also some pointers for First Nations students when they come here to CDU. So our aims are to provide evidence of student experience that contributes to their ability to undertake and complete. Also to provide evidence to support ways to increase lecturer and institutional cultural competency. I'm using that term cultural competency because that's one that's commonly used, but we know that you can't just tick a box and say, okay, you're competent now. That's not what we're implying with the research in using that terminology. We understand it's more of a responsiveness or a reflexiveness that needs to be enacted within an institution. So we're hoping to produce a good practice guide for both lecturers and for students when they come here about, what can you expect as a student when you come to CDU. Okay, so this is our second stage. So you only see the middle bit. So this is when we focused on lecturers and we focused on support staff. So in our first year, what we did was we got to listen to student voice, and for them to nominate some examples of lecturers and of pedagogical practices that helped inform their positive engagement at CDU. So the second stage is about contacting nominated lecturers and also support staff, and being able to then continue with our comprehensive collection of data. So we were to complete our interviews and also to conduct some focus groups. And we did that both at the Casuarina and the Sydney campus. We used NVivo for coding and analysis, which, you know, we're still working with that. We've got so much data, we're still working with the data to collate our findings. The main focus that we've been working towards is the practical application of our findings. So what exactly within our findings would go into a guidebook for either lecturers or for students. We understand that we have some more data that we have to add to our existing data. So we've worked with the Indigenous leadership area as well, and they made a suggestion of a data set that we might incorporate into what we've already collected ourselves. So we have drafts, which you'll see the cover. We haven't got all of the ideas set out for the inside of the books yet, but we definitely have, you know, a concept that we've started. So we are now doing our presentation about our project. We've acquitted our project funds, thank goodness for that. And this is our second year. We still have to apply for our funding for our final year, in which we'll really focus on our outputs. So that's really our stage 2. So our qualitative data included interviews with CDU lecturers identified in the survey, interviews with professional staff as well, who felt that they supported Indigenous students, and then our 2 separate focus groups to add, you know, just that more detail in more of a guided kind of conversation, sort of filling in more of the gaps that we wanted to know about. So, yeah, so that's me. So I think now I hand over to Alicia.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Thank you again for everyone coming today. Oh, sorry, put this on and I'll put my glasses on. Yeah, so this is just a bit of a summary. We had around 84 students respond to our survey in year 1, and they nominated around 46 individual staff members that had really made their experience at CDU really wonderful. And from those, we then spoke individually with 16 of those staff members. 12 of those were academic teaching staff, and 4 of those were professional staff, whether it be in First Nations student support or in the library or somewhere like that. Of those, 12 were non-First Nations interviewees and 4 were First Nations interviewees. They'd been here from anywhere from over 10 years to just over 1 year in terms of their tenure at CDU. And it was a pretty much a semi-structured interview. Otherwise, we would have been there all day and could have been. They were just so it was amazing to be able to talk to them and what they'd been doing. So it was semi-structured. It will also help with our analysis at the end of the day, and they were pre-mailed or pre-emailed a consent form and also pre-emailed the questions. So, and most of them had elected to actually put a few prompts down before they came and spoke to us. Anyway, we'll pop on to the next slide then. Thanks, Lani. So the first question was about how they define cultural competence. And as Tracy pointed out, it's sort of it's something that's never ending. We're always learning and we don't always get it right, but that's all part of the process. And of course, as a result of that, the definitions, if you want to call them that, were very varied, and we chose to ask it up front because we thought that some of the questions later on might have led them to to change the way they felt about it. So I was looking for sort of top of mind definitions, and there were some pretty much standard thoughts about how it's about owning and understanding our own biases first, and then what that might bring into a classroom or a support environment. So that's, you can read, I'm not going to read all of them out, but that's the sort of thing that people, it's about being, being empathetic and expressing humility. And also, and it's not quite sure if it's here, perhaps not, but it was a theme throughout that we needed to make sure that we didn't just box Indigenous students into one box, that everyone is different and everyone's experience is different. And it's very, very, it was an underlying theme throughout, the importance of making sure we recognise difference. Oh, there is the diversity that exists across and within Indigenous communities. And also recognising that another thing that a lot of people brought out was, when students talk about the funerals and the sorry business they have to participate in, we could probably count on one or two hands the number of people we can call as non-Indigenous people that have passed away in our lifetime, whereas that's not, I would say, the lived experience of most of our Indigenous students. So just being mindful of things like that. So just moving on. Oh, whoop. Did I go? Maybe. Oh, yeah. So the strategies used to, the next question was about what some general strategies used to effectively engage First Nations students to stay until completion, because that was our goal. I think here the strong point was it was the, again, that not everybody's the same. So they really appreciated the one-on-one. That was pretty consistent. The other consistent thing was that the CDU website is pretty difficult to navigate, and even those staff that have been here for a long time, a student comes to them with something they'd like to have an answer to, but we don't even know where to go to find that. So there is a real need. They're sort of looking for a one-stop shop where from there you can springboard to logical things like I need help with this, or I need this, or I need that. But students are coming to them to help them get organised, to access scholarships. It's harder than we think, and to navigate individual paths for each student depending on their individual circumstances. The importance of trust and reciprocity that Tracy mentioned. Understanding and compassion. I think the need to consider. There was lots of conversations about how our assessment tasks were almost incomprehensible. So how can we make them more accessible in terms of people knowing what they actually need to do? And then there was lots of examples of ways that potentially we can look at different forms of assessment, like consider different forms of assessment without compromising the integrity of the assessment itself. And to recognise that we do have flexibility in terms of assessment dates, so just a due date. So be mindful, be understanding, and listen carefully. There was those comments about, we have two eyes, 2 ears and a mouth, and use them, in the reverse order sort of thing. So lots of that came out a bit. And create those, we all know well we don't have enough Indigenous or First Nations staff as teaching staff at the front line, and so how can we accommodate that? But by trying to get many guest lecturers as we can from around the locality, online, or from Menzies as well, and create those environments where First Nations students feel comfortable in sharing their experiences, because that can just enrich the learning environment, and also for them as well as their classmates. Thanks. So just, I've got a slide and then some of the actual conversations that came through. So the other one was about boundaries in the classroom, and a lot of staff brought up about the classroom management with students from different backgrounds, non-First Nation students and international students, and a real lack of understanding in the classroom. So the importance of setting boundaries, making sure you think before you speak and being respectful. And I think there was also a lot of staff that felt they didn't have the expertise to do that as well as they'd like either. So that's something, one of the things, it's not going into the guidebooks, but we collected as we analysed all the conversations, was the sort of ideas for improvement that staff gave. So that's sort of a report to management as a guidebook. So yeah, and use the questions. So listen to what students are asking you about, and then incorporate those their understandings into your responses or into what else you bring into the delivery of your classes. So, yeah. Things that students need help with. Technology was number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I think. And it becomes more problematic the more remote our students are. So, yeah, basically, technological literacy is a challenge for all of the First Nations students. LearnLine was repeatedly mentioned again and again and again. Two-factor authentication, when people quite often change their phone numbers or lose their phone. The lack of, enough internet connectivity to go from this point to another point to download a form that's over there. It really, the depth of where you need to go to get things done is really difficult. Financial support. I should have mentioned that most of the staff that were recommended, it might just be, it is the same way in terms of the number of Indigenous students we have at CDU, but mostly in health and then education. So they were predominantly the staff we spoke to, as the academic staff we spoke to as well. So I think it's those placements a lot of the time are really crippling, not just for First Nations students, but for a lot of students, for any student. And then doubly coping with the work-life balances that most First Nations students are managing. I think one of the staff members, I don't know a First Nations student who isn't working. Everybody has a job of some sort, whether it's caring for family, at the front line or in a paid job. Finances were problematic, and going with that, coping with the study and work-life balances, and submitting forms or information. Again, the website, getting the form, one thing, submitting it another one, and also just submitting assessments on LearnLine. Just the next slide, thanks, Lani. So, there's a need for a central point for a student so they can reach out from there for specific to sports. The need to navigate to find things is very difficult. LearnLine, I mentioned, is a massive hurdle. I think this is from a staff member who does a lot of remote teaching, can be a repository, but other learning material needs to happen on Zoom and by email communication. They're having much more success using more simple, less deep technologies. And the two-factor authentication that I mentioned before, because they more person-to-person contact. Yeah, and just the LearnLine, getting, you've got to get in there. It's just the layers to get through the technology is problematic the more remote you are. So just trying to remove as many boundaries as we possibly can to students' continuing engagement, I guess. So we asked about First Nations student experience in a range of domains, and we're just going to present some information on 2. One was teaching, and the other one is on pastoral care and support. But there were other domains that we got data about. So having good unit design, content, and delivery. It's for any student, but that's really critically important. The other one was about, which I'm pretty sure we're trying to get that consistent template for LearnLine navigation so that people don't have to keep relearning where to find the same thing. It's really, really important for First Nations students. Making sure that it's not just, what do they call it? The University of Google or someone. I think people were talking about that too many of our units are pretty much just like click on and watch, but they would like a bit more interactivity in the LearnLine sites. And also about, this is partly about delivery as well as, well, actually this teaching is delivery and content, but so the tutorial, using their tutorials as interactive discussions about what students have learned and what they're not sure about. So there was a pretty consistent pattern of not lecturing to students. It was more about doing a half-hour interactive video that could have had some quiz questions embedded in it. And then when they get to the tutorials, it's more about, okay, what have we learned? Really, this is the real learning going on here. And make sure we create those environments where First Nations students are really keen to talk about what they've learned. And I didn't put it in, and I don't know why I didn't, but I remember I put a note to myself. Quite a few teachers talked about using third year in First Nations students to support the learning, particularly the first years. Everyone said it's the first year experience, it's the critical one. So how can we get those students that have gone before them maybe helping in the tutorials, even in the early stages of the tutorials of a unit, so that they get that confidence to talk. Next slide, thanks, Lani. So a good lecturer or a good unit coordinator can entice every student to want to participate. If you get your questions right, you've got the topic delivery, students are interested straight up. Do a lot of delivery design it, make it very interactive. I know staff are always time poor in terms of preparing LearnLine sites, but it's just a reminder of how important that is. Using the same platform, so keep it consistent. If there's content online, and sometimes it will refer to the textbooks, I try and use that mixture for different learners of written words. We embed a lot of videos, so to try and do that and then refer to them, read these pages of a textbook and do these questions. So it was about trying to engage with people who like to learn in different ways. So whether it be text, video, conversation, trying to utilise all of those. So the tutorial we talk about is reflective of the week. It's more about a discussion around what they've learned and what they're not sure about. Now we're here to talk about it, the understanding and try and apply to them to real world situations. That was something else that commonly came up that teachers wanted to use. Try and make it as practical, as real as you possibly can, and bring other people. It's like most of our students are adults. Bring them in and use their experiences to help apply the theoretical concepts. Thanks, Lani. Another one, verbally acknowledge difference and embrace its value in the classroom. And that's such one of the amazing things about teaching at a place like CDU, where we've got that amazing diversity, so use it. Using different delivery styles, I just mentioned that, to allow for greater engagement and deeper learning. Consider different forms of assessment. So, whether it can be the option to do an audio or a PowerPoint or a video or something creative that uses people's strengths and advantages. And be as accommodating as you can, particularly around those assessment task time deadlines, and give people options. Thanks, Lani. Next slide. We come from different life experiences, encouraging students to speak up and help us all understand those cultural differences. Stress the importance, because we're all here to learn together. The strength is your background, and you can definitely use that to add to what everyone's doing in the classroom. Here we go, another case-based learning. It's not like a lecture. They pre-record a lecture as a quiz embedded in it, usually less than 30 minutes. And then any early live sessions or tutorials. A few of them mentioned using breakout groups because they felt that people's voices are more likely to be heard in smaller groups rather than in one large group, particularly with the First Nations students. So you can quite often find that the more confident students will dominate the online environment. Again, with the assessments, be as accommodating as you can, because with any culture, there's things that can impact on a student's life. So keep communicating. Those were some of the things up front about making sure you're keeping engaged with your students. Lecture content specifically. So that was all about teaching, but the content, we asked some questions about content and delivery that's demonstrated cultural competence. Most of them said they really supported that acknowledgement of country on the front of the units. They really just appreciated that being there. Quite a few of them mentioned, and I know this unit has had lots of iterations over its life, and it's had lots of people who love it and hate it, and I think we've probably all taught into it at some stage or other, but there was comments that they thought that unit was really valuable, the CEC 107 unit, so a common unit that is offered in nursing. Again, not universalising the experience of Indigenous people, that they're all different. And actually knowing about that diversity is important. So try and get students conversing in classrooms to learn more about their backgrounds. Trying to find learning materials and readings by Indigenous people. We don't have that many scholars. We have our amazing Tracy. So if you're in education, we're lucky about that. And we do have many others. We do have staff. So really engage those voices as if you can in the readings, and work with Indigenous guest lecturers, which I've mentioned. Thank you. Guest lecturers can present their perspectives on topics from their worldview and talk about it, because we always, it's always difficult trying to do that when you're not a First Nations person like myself. So use others, bring other people in, and they can see then how that knowledge can directly be applied in the field. Next slide, Lani. We asked them about, we asked staff members if they had any great resources, culturally appropriate resources for engagement. And the list was very short, unfortunately. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to actually collate a resource base, so like get that ask that question more broadly of CDU staff about what they use, because it's all the staff we spoke to struggle. None of them thought they were really pretty chuffed about getting nominated, but they didn't really know that they're necessarily doing a great job, and they thought they had plenty to learn, and they just would love. They're looking to see the results so they can to see what they can learn from others. There's a real hunger to know more how to do this better. And as I mentioned, we're mostly speaking with health staff. So there was SMS for Deadly Dad. So that just you can sign up and it'll send you I think it's one a day about support. This is the ARDS. The next one's the ARDS website. And so there is a full course on learning about Yolngu culture and worldviews, but you can do 2 units for free. So I can't remember how much the course is. There is a corporate price as well. And maybe we already subscribe to it. I don't know at CDU, but you can do 2 units for free. Aboriginal K-12 education, some support resources there, some care manuals, Centre for Remote Health. I got, oh goodness. That's good. That's his full website, but there was a particular thesis that was recommended. I'll go to the next slide. Journal on Decolonising Methodologies. Emily Castell from Curtin, some of her papers were suggested. Managing Money Better, a whole lot of little games for educators, and also the Well Mob. Again, a whole lot of resources that were there, so they're worth chasing down. Also, on the next slide, we've got some of our own resources that we've got translated into Yolngu and Warlpiri, about how to use LearnLine and some of the services that are available at CDU. That was an old HEPPP project that I was involved in, and also someone suggested the Indigenous Australians for Dummies book there as well.
Which is actually written by Professor
Larissa.
Which would be a good read.
Yeah, so this is the delivery side of things. Again, having knowledge of a country up front. Use storytelling and provide real-world practice scenarios. Again, it's those different ways of using different teaching and learning techniques to engage different learners with different learning style preferences. So accommodate the feedback from students. Yeah, so it was the same. Someone said about using the question, listen carefully to what the question students are asking, and use that to then help you direct how you actually deliver the session, to see where they're not understanding or where they'd like more information. Be very inclusive in your language, that you value the contribution of all the students from all cultural backgrounds. Again, this came up quite a bit about staff had difficulties in classrooms and online and face-to-face. So the importance of setting boundaries to make sure there's that mutual respect is really important. If you can, I assume this costs money, but if you can co-teach with an Indigenous educator, and I think we need to think about where we need to invest. I was thinking different skill sets, different levels of knowledge, authority, so important if we can do that. Again, for remote students, it's most beneficial and good to join synchronously so that they can be there together, which means calling up the local organisation in person to get them on the Zoom. So the remote students, some of them were going to the ALPA remote university hubs or remote university centres, so they were getting them there, or they had a workplace or the council rooms where they have the facility set up so that the learners could do it together. This thing about not being on their own came through a lot, so doing it in groups, being together, supporting each other, and again, it wasn't using Collaborate or anything which would have had problems for that place to get access to. They can just go in and do a Zoom meeting very quickly. Next slide, okay. So just going on quickly to pastoral care and support, the services that these staff, the area offers, and some of you may actually be there, engagement calls, emails, text messaging, mentoring, they engage in study planning, which they said, so do academic staff as well. That was a real thing that they got involved with, and also organising tutors. They provide safe places for people to come and use computers or just have a coffee or have something to eat or just to to breathe. They do a lot of student advocacy, particularly between academic staff and the sort of the the central office around timelines and assessments and finance, etc., etc. They also provide LearnLine support for students there. Next slide, thanks, Lani. Yeah, so it's pretty obvious. Yeah, where they can sit and feel relaxed and comfortable. If there's a problem, they can always talk to people there. Yeah, advocating for students with the different lecturers and things like that. Refer them to different services that they may require, might be housing, counselling, or anything like that. So
working from that strength-based approach of thinking how to support people to succeed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, definitely the first year students are really those that need most help. They require a lot of support, finding, navigating, LearnLine, submitting. So they do offer an academic skills workshop for first year students, but really until you actually get to the pointy end and have to do it yourself, it's not quite the same. And again, things like that where it would be good to be able to support and third year students to come in and work with first year students in that environment would be very valuable as well. Yeah, there was a lot of comments about we don't know how many. I don't know why it's not in here either, but one of the big problems is that our staff, there's no flag for staff to tell them who is a First Nations students in their class. And so they spend a lot of time not knowing who's there. And I'm not sure about the rules about ticking a box and saying I am or I'm not, but staff feel that they go in totally unprepared because they just don't know in advance of a unit starting who or who isn't in their classroom as a First Nations student.
Yeah, for some students who obviously would be in a minority, may not feel comfortable in identifying themselves as Indigenous within the group for fear that they might be treated differently. So, you can't just make assumptions. You have to teach to be inclusive of everyone.
Yeah. So, but staff felt they weren't doing the job that they wanted to do because they didn't know. So we could sort of unpack what that could look like. And also, what's the other thing that they... Oh, I forget now. It'll come to me. All right, well, just move on to the next slide then, thanks. Also, yeah, supporting students in pathways from vet to higher ed. I think I've got a comment about that in the next slide. Individualising student study plans and loads, considering work-life balance, because if they just sign up online through Student Central, that is certainly not the experience. Considering group tutoring as an option, there's a great comment on the next slide about that, and consider allocating an Indigenous student support person role to an academic staff member in discipline areas. If we go to the next slide, Lani. So we have different pathways, this whole pathway from higher ed to vet, and the student support services felt that was really a big jump, and we underestimate how big that jump is. And you go from, small assignments or small practical assessment tasks that don't have large writing components in vet to a 2,000-word essay with detailed referencing requirements that don't, that's not the sort of authority that a lot of First Nations people have referred to. So it's about explaining how that's different. So there does need to be some support, better support in that pathway. And this was an example where this student was also a footy player as well, and she just signed up online and done her signed up to do a semester's work, and then she didn't realise that she didn't need to do a full load, and she was struggling, and it was like, rather than fail, like you need to individually, or encourage people to have conversations or to realise that there's not, everyone, you can do things differently. So rather than, so just it's recognition of those individual situations. They're using group tutoring successfully in nursing, and again, it's that being together. So sometimes it's difficult to get an ITAS tutors in the first place, or good ones. But what they're doing is that's working really well. So the tutor is working with a group of students at once, so it's cost effective for everybody. They can get more hours, and they're doing things together. So that's potentially something that other disciplines might look at. And the last one on that, I think, Lani, after that, this was a decision by, I can't remember what they were called then, not more than team leaders, and that that person in charge allocated a staff member, it was in addition to that person's load. It wasn't a paid part of the load, but it wasn't an experience for that person. Ideally, it would have been a First Nations person, but they didn't have anyone that could do that job, and the person was actually based in Alice Springs. But it was an academic. It was an academic person who provided academic pastoral support to students. So within the discipline, so they were an expert in the discipline. They knew who all the students were. They made regular contact with them. And I know that the Indigenous support staff feel that there's still not a strong enough connect between them and the academic staff members. It is getting better in the nursing space, but they really think they could do a better job if they were better connected. And potentially, if you had a person like this in your academic space, and that could be the first port of call for the Indigenous support staff office, and then could branch out from there. So, but this was a decision that the discipline leader made, and obviously at some level paid for, but it said it worked really, really well. She brought students together in Alice Springs. When she came up to Darwin, she got them together, but it was more of it was an academic reaching out as well as, so they just thought that was a really valuable. And I think at the moment there's a HEPPP project in health, I think, looking at a bit like this as well. Yeah. So I think that's been recognised that was something that worked, but it didn't continue once that staff member wasn't in that role. But anyway, I think that's me. Thank goodness.
So much information. Thank you. So can you jump to the focus group? Can I get the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Now it's red. Can you hear me? Can we jump to the focus group, Casuarina, please?
Oh, no.
Next one. You've got one more.
All right, we just wanted to ask the staff how did they know that students were succeeding? And it was pretty common. It's the communication. If they were talking to you, then you knew that they were engaged. You knew that they were going to succeed. It's the ones they don't hear from, we know that they're struggling. And it wasn't, that's why it's so important what they're doing in the First Nations support group, is reaching out and engaging with students on multiple occasions. But when students are asking questions, when they're asking for help, when they're not afraid to ask for help, when they're engaging with the formative assessments, a lot of staff said they had those little, they weren't necessarily large value, or they weren't even valued, didn't have a mark attached to them, assessments. But if students were regularly checking in and getting those little things done, they knew they were on target. They said some were even asking about readings beyond the nominated readings, and so that was another idea, another telltale sign, or even requesting additional information about a particular topic because they were particularly interested in it. Yeah, so the people who show up, the people who actually ask for help, ask for tutoring, these are the students I've seen that are successful. Some of them are actually engaging with PASS, the subjects with large numbers of enrolments have support. And I've talked for years about, why can't we get in? I know it's an international model, but why can't we get Indigenous PASS leaders? I think that would make a huge difference to the numbers and in the engagement in that area. People are using the different scholarships, different services where they can get internships, people asking those things. These are the ones that are keen. And if they're engaging, asking questions, even if they say this might be a stupid question, even if they're sending a panic email to say, oh my God, I haven't got it written, I'm not going to be ready, I thought I was, they're reaching out and they trust you enough to engage. So it's, again, I think one of the early slides said about the importance of that trust, so that they're happy to reach out and help. So
thank you. All right, so let's jump to the focus group in Casuarina first. We held it in September, and it was then followed up by another focus group in Sydney. So I'm going to talk about Casuarina and then wrap up. We're getting close to the end, and I'll also talk about the common things that were pointed out in these two focus groups. So in Casuarina, we actually asked a lot of questions that were in some ways similar to the questions that were asked in the interviews, but we had an hour and a half and a couple of people in the same room, so we needed to be very mindful of time. What we found were a lot of ideas and comments regarding what works for students, but also what might help lecturers. So the first slide looks at what works for students, and on the second one, I will talk about the lecturers and the professional staff's perspective. So the first thing that stood out was that We have a lot of external students, and this includes First Nation students. And for them, when they first come to CDU, they struggle with their course content. It's a lot, and it's not just one unit, but they usually enroll in more than one. So what works for them is the personal support that Alicia already illustrated in so many ways. It is the lecturer that is available, that is contactable, that is highly responsive, and they are, able and willing to always answer a question or a query that a student might have. These students may lack either confidence or awareness of the number of support services that CDU offers. So this is something that we should be pushing out more in the early weeks when they start, to let them know what is available and where they can reach out for advice and help. But what actually works really well is the wrap-up support, which means that it is the lecturer and the unit coordinator who are available, who are contactable, who are knowledgeable, but also all of the other support services that we have. So it is the First Nations support unit, the tutorial support. Everyone is working together to support an individual student or a cohort of students. This is when they feel supported, because everyone is willing and knowledgeable to help them. Now, one thing that also, that I don't think that, Alicia, you talked about the role of the library. There are individuals amongst the library staff, and we're talking here about the library on our campus, who are willing and engaging in more than, I guess, expected ways with First Nation students. But I guess what goes back to the point that Alicia was mentioning earlier, it's about feeling welcome, having a sense of belonging, that a university campus is where they can feel at home and feel comfortable. And so what we had is that First Nation students may not always feel comfortable, and they will not always go to the library. So while we have these individuals making effort to help First Nation students, the library should be seen and embraced as part of the wider support network. Because they can do it and they're doing it. However, and this is the last bullet point here, we have, as we know, sometimes international students manning the front desk. And this is the first point of contact. Now, I'm studying also international migration. I'm a migrant myself, and I know that for these kids, it is such a wonderful opportunity to get something that is close to a professional experience, which they don't get if they go and look for jobs in town. But at the same time, we had of examples where there was a First Nation students coming and seeking help, advice, and the international student at the front desk was not able to, smoothly and confidently answer that query. So one of the opinions that was expressed in our focus group was that some training for the international students at the front desk would be beneficial, right? Can we go to the next slide, please? So we're still in the Casuarina focus group, and this is more of a perspective of the lecturers and the academic staff. One comment that was made, and this is at the top quote here, is that unit coordinators and lecturers are very open and willing to incorporate First Nations knowledges and to acknowledge, what these students bring. But they're so inundated with work, the workloads are so high that they're not sure where to go. And so a follow-up comment was made that unit coordinators and course coordinators should be able and should feel confident to approach the First Nations leadership unit, and instead of just communicating by email, actually build these professional relationships. So I guess it shows that the ability of building and maintaining these personal relationships is important, not only for the students who we are supporting, that they like having a lecturer who is available, they can speak with them, they know, they can connect the email and the face. This is also important for the teaching staff. They want to have these relationships with the First Nations leadership unit. Another couple of things that I thought were really important in the conversation that we had in the focus group. The onus to ensure that the unit content as well as delivery, so the in-class and the online delivery, is safe, falls on the unit coordinators and the lecturers. And they need time and guidance and a personal touch. So someone who will come and help them, perhaps sitting, at their computer at the same desk, to make the units and the delivery style safe. So again, it's about the personal relationship. As far as the cultural competence in teaching, this was another topic that we discussed. And we heard that students come back to classes where they are encouraged to use their lived experiences in the academic context. Now, this is tricky because if we welcome and encourage students to use their lived experiences, this then challenges the traditional approach where you have to cite a reference, you have to cite a source in the brackets and demonstrate your academic knowledge this way. But students really enjoy coming to classes and participating where they can use what they know and they can see that it is taken well and it is welcome. A comment at the bottom, sorry, not at the bottom, right here, about relatable case studies. This is what Alicia was also talking about, that on the one hand, it is important to make sure that case studies that are used in teaching are case studies that our First Nation students can relate to, but at the same time, they should not take this deficit approach that, for example, in health, an example that we had was that if there is a midwifery student and they're talking about working with First Nations clients, a case study should not have a woman who perhaps has diabetes, was a smoker, and her baby will be low weight, because this is all stereotypes. So we should avoid presenting First Nations communities in this light. And finally, we ask what helps retention. And this goes back to the comment that Tracy made in her opening remarks, that we are also interested in knowing what helps students to complete and ultimately to graduate. So a First Nations academic lead, and this was a lovely example from midwifery, permits students to feel themselves at home, to see themselves because there are others around them who are also First Nations, and they can see that they're functioning in an academic environment. Another example was a First Nations past mentor, and we had these past mentors. Now, Alicia said that this is not happening all the time every semester, but when a First Nations past mentor is available to work with students, it helps. And also, again, what Alicia was talking about and which was illustrated in our focus group discussion is the importance of being flexible. So working with students through their learning plans, being, maybe not always going to look at the new system of approving extensions in LearnLine. This is mechanistic, and it is very impersonal, right? Because it goes through that interface. We've had examples where lecturers said, we prefer to pick up the phone and actually speak with the person, individually, and then set up the plan when they will be able to submit. So maintaining learning plans to enable their personal life to happen, because as Alicia said, everyone has a job, and maintaining personal and importantly caring relationships with individual students. So showing care, not just academic interest, when are you going to submit your next assessment, but actually being caring. And finally, prompt responses, and this went both for the academic staff as well as anyone who is in our numerous support teams. So rather than making a student wait a couple of hours to receive a call back or to receive an email, a sooner response. So I will now hand over to Guzyal for 2 slides, and then I'll come back with the.
So second focus group, okay, before I launch into the focus group, you must remember, as Tracy said, this is the second year. In the first year, we interviewed the students. And in the first year, all of the students said how First Nations Unit, library, and academic learning and student support were incredibly important for them in the beginning of their journey. This is what came loud and clear from Sydney as well. We had really action-oriented, proactive type of high energy type of focus group. And they said, what we need to do is front load that care and support that we give our students. this pastoral care must be proactive. So we already know that we used to open Learn Line on the day of the studies when the semester starts. Now we are opening it 2 weeks ahead. Do students know about it? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. We don't know. But what we have to do, we have proactively load the pastoral care so the students, once they have the problem, they already have the trust established and they can go and find the person with whom they have the trust relationships established. Whether it's First Nations unit support, whether it's academic learning support, whether it's the library, so they can already go to the trusted place. Again, tutoring services. We are working really hard to make sure that all our students know about these tutoring services. And unfortunately, sometimes we reach them, sometimes we don't. Unfortunately, and we know that a high level of success depends on connecting the tutor with the student early. And once this relationship is working, then the unit, even if the tutor is not 100% aware of the unit itself, contents itself, they will be able to help students to navigate the Learn Line and all the other supports. Again, came up loud and clear that we must have dedicated First Nations academic to support students. It came from interviews because we have conducted interviews, but also was loud and clear in Sydney group that First Nations academic ideally, in the ideal situation, must be present with the meetings when we have First Nations students and will be able to guide everyone through the cultural safe practices. So we have this wraparound support that Kate was talking about. And of course, meeting the students in their academic journey. Like we are not asking for those references. References came up as well, that APA referencing, that we are asking 2,000 words essay from sometimes it's a student who is ready, sometimes it's not. And we are asking for really high level academic writing from the outset. With some lectures, and I'm now talking from the lecturer's point of view as well, sometimes we have lectures full, so sometimes we have 200 students in class, sometimes we have 700 students in class. And when we do, maybe, and that's again, Tracy, goes back to your comment about some students want to be identified in the class initially, some students don't. But if the student wants to be identified, this list of the students can be given to the lecturer, so lecturer is already aware, and we can again start establishing the trust. So if something comes up, the student has this trust to approach the lecturer or some other supports. CDU is large. That is obviously reflected by the navigation of our website and everything else. And unfortunately, sometimes we are not working well within our own faculties. So what came up was amazing HEPPP project, and we are also HEPPP project, that is running in health. And so it's cultural safety in the classroom and trauma-informed practice. Fantastic, and what the focus group commented on was how amazing is this project. So if we can share and work together ourselves better on the strength-based resources and strength-based pedagogy, andragogy, that will be fantastic as well. What came as well from Sydney was that holistic, exactly what you are talking about, Kate, a wraparound support. That we can't look at academics separately, Learn Line separately, tutors separately, and everyone separately. We are all in it together. Different statistics in different universities, but something like 50% of our staff is now professional staff, and we have to work on it properly. Turns out, and I didn't know this myself, our the first biggest, of course, cohort of Indigenous students is in NT, but the second biggest cohort of our Indigenous students is in New South Wales. And we should work better, especially apparently in the Western Sydney geographic area. That's where we should definitely engage better. Sometimes we can work better either with the services or even with other universities. So UTS is just down the road from Sydney campus. They have apparently Jambana Institute, which is quite impressive in its reach and quite impressive in the work that they do. Maybe it's worth running some co-ops together, something maybe we can, maybe we can't, but maybe exploring this opportunity further if we can support our students. Alicia already mentioned this. This also came up in a TechSec conference everywhere, placements. Placements is the weak point, especially in health, and that came up loud and clear from all students. This is not only CDU problem. This is section wide. This is apparently placements are very, very difficult, and sometimes so they create a lot of heartache for our students. Okay, so Kate will give the summary of the focus groups, and then we will give back to Tracy. But most of all, most importantly, what I should as well let everybody know, I think the beauty of this group, particular research group, is the way these amazing ladies and Tracy work together. So I would give big shout out to Tracy.
Fantastic team.
Yeah, yes, Kate is summarizing the
Thank you. So if we can jump to the next slide. When I looked at what we had in the focus group here at the Casuarina campus, and then I looked at what Guzyal found out, I put together some common observations and points. So first of all, for the benefit of our First Nations students, the whole gamut of CDU support services is critical. So this is the pastoral care, this is the academic support. In both groups, a mention was made that if we have First Nations Australians as academic leads, this really helps our First Nations students to feel comfortable and to see themselves in these other, in these individuals. And it helps because they can see that, someone else has achieved something. They're now the academic lead of the discipline, and, they have something, the students have something to aspire to, at the same time feeling a sense of cultural safety. We've given a lot of examples about how personal relationships really help, and this goes for the students, but also for the lecturers who are interested in incorporating in a safe way Indigenous content and in recognizing the value that our First Nations students bring to their learning at CDU. So personal relationships, ongoing assessment of student circumstances. So it's all about these conversations, being available, being knowledgeable, responding promptly. Again, this point was made over and over again, and showing care. Yes, so not just ticking the box, but actually showing care. And this, together with the support services that we have, can help. And I really like the expression here that was used in our group at Casuarina, to soften the terms for these students, right? And course coordinators and lecturers, as we said, are keen to incorporate and to learn themselves. They are learners in this context, right? But they need guidance to have the content and the delivery of their units safe and accessible. And what is needed is the time, because you also the quote from one of the participants in our focus group, that everyone is just so busy in their week that we need to somehow create time for lecturers and for the unit coordinators to pause and learn, and then implement what they have learned to the benefit of our First Nations students. So I will now hand over to Tracy. We've got a few more slides, and then we'll have to.
Okay, so thank you so much. We've reached the end of the presentation now. So thank you. Just to finish off, I would like to say that our intended outputs are our guidebooks, and they're well underway. You can see all of the fantastic data and messages that we've collected, and we're starting to compile that into more user-friendly information that we can make, you know, practical supports for lecturers and students. So some of the comments, again, about how important it is for students to feel supported in their studies here at CDU, how they need to feel that this is their place as well, you know, that they belong here too, and that everyone can work together to achieve success. So Lani, could you just go to the next slide, please? So this is something that our lecturer guide might look like. You know, we're thinking of having it as like a stand-up kind of flip book that a lecturer could keep on their desk, kind of reminding them about, you know, what kind of strategies, what other kind of best practices they might implement into their own teaching or into their own courses of study. And then the next one, the student guidebook. So we're thinking of maybe a smaller kind of book that's something easy to access, but also to pop into an orientation week bag of goodies, you know, that students might be able to access as soon as they arrive. Yes. To know that people are thinking about them. So thank you. That is the end of our presentation today. You guys give a touch of my colleagues.